The first light in the Scottish Highlands doesn't so much arrive as it seeps into the world, a slow dilution of the night's deep ink. It crept through the windows of Matilda, our camper van, painting soft grey streaks across the miniature galley kitchen. I woke to the familiar, gentle hiss of the gas heater kicking in, a sound that had become more of a lullaby than any clock radio ever was. Beside me, Karen was still asleep, a peaceful smile on her face, her silver-streaked hair fanned out on the pillow. We'd found this spot late last night, a small, gravel pull-off overlooking Loch Nan Wam. The water was a sheet of polished steel this morning, mirroring a sky that was slowly blushing from grey to a pale, hopeful pink. This was our life now. For the past 3 years, since we both turned 54, sold the house, and horrified our grown children, this was our home. A 7-meter-long box on wheels, and more freedom than we'd ever known. Let me tell you, leaving everything behind isn't a decision you make lightly. It's a conversation that starts as a whisper, a what if shared over a bottle of wine on a Tuesday night after a particularly grueling day at the office. For years, it was just that, a fantasy. But fantasies have a way of putting down roots if you water them enough. For us, the water was a growing sense of time slipping away, of days becoming indistinguishable from one another. Karen felt it most acutely. She'd worked in administration, a world of spreadsheets and deadlines that had been slowly dimming her light. I saw it. The way her shoulders were permanently tensed, the way her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. Now, watching her sleep in the quiet glow of a Scottish dawn, it was like seeing the person I first fell in love with, but with the added wisdom and grace of the years etched into her features. This life, this crazy, unpredictable, sometimes maddening life on the road, had given her back to herself. And in doing so, it had given her back to me. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, a practiced maneuver in our compact space. The floor was cold on my bare feet. I fired up the kettle for coffee, the pop and roar of the gas stove a welcome sound in the stillness. The plan for the day was simple, as most of our best plans were. We were going to drive the road to the Isles in reverse, heading east, but taking a detour north towards a tiny, almost mythical body of water called Loch Horn. It was described in our tattered guidebook as forebodingly beautiful, a phrase that was too tempting to ignore. The rich, dark smell of coffee filled the van. Karen stirred, blinking her eyes open. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "Morning, sleepyhead," I said, passing her a steaming mug. I was just admiring our front yard. She sat up, pulling the duvet around her shoulders, and peered out the window. A soft, "Oh, wow," escaped her lips. "David, it's beautiful. Told you it would be worth the late-night drive." We sat there for a while, sipping our coffee in comfortable silence, watching the mist dance on the surface of the loch. This was our routine. No rush, no agenda beyond the one we set for ourselves. The old life was a constant barrage of external demands. The new one was about internal rhythms. "So, Loch Horn today?" she asked, finally breaking the quiet. "Loch, forebodingly beautiful, Horn," I corrected with a grin. "Ready for an adventure?" "Always," she said, and the way her eyes sparkled, I knew she meant it. "But first, porridge. An adventure requires fuel." An hour later, we were packed up and ready to go. Karen was in the passenger seat, acting as navigator and DJ, a dual role she took very seriously. I was at the wheel of Matilda, our trusty steed. She wasn't fast, she wasn't fancy, but she was ours. We'd bought her as a plain white panel van and spent the better part of a year converting her ourselves. Every cabinet, every wire, every cushion held a memory of a weekend spent covered in sawdust and arguing good-naturedly over schematics. "Okay, according to this," Karen said, tapping the map on her tablet, "we stay on the A830 for another 20 miles, then it's a left turn onto a road that doesn't seem to have a name. It's just a line." "My favorite kind of road," I laughed. "The ones that lead to the best places." The engine rumbled to life, and with a final glance at the serene loch, we pulled out onto the tarmac. The highlands unfolded around us, a majestic tapestry of heather-clad mountains, sudden, glittering lochs, and vast, empty skies. We drove past ancient stone walls and flocks of sheep that seemed to believe they owned the road, which, to be fair, they probably did. Everything was perfect. The sun was out, a minor miracle in Scotland, the playlist was hitting all the right nostalgic notes, and the landscape was breathtaking. It was one of those days that felt like a gift, a confirmation that we'd made the right choice. And that, of course, is usually when things start to go wrong. We were about 15 miles into our journey when I first heard it. It wasn't loud. It was a faint, rhythmic ticking sound, just beneath the familiar chug of Matilda's diesel engine. A sound that didn't belong. "Do you hear that?" I asked, turning the music down. Karen tilted her head. "Hear what?" "That ticking noise. Listen." We both fell silent, straining our ears. There it was again. Tick. 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 It seemed to match the rhythm of the engine's revolutions. My stomach did a little flip. In van life, your vehicle is your everything. It's your car, your house, your kitchen, your bedroom. An unusual engine noise is the equivalent of finding a crack in the foundation of your home. "It's probably nothing," Karen said, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Maybe just a stone caught somewhere." "Maybe," I replied, but I didn't believe it. I've spent enough time with my head under Matilda's bonnet to know her sounds. This was a new one. The joy of the morning began to evaporate, replaced by a familiar, cold trickle of anxiety. The what if started to crowd in. What if it's serious? What if we break down out here, miles from anywhere? What if this is the big, expensive repair we've been dreading? I kept driving, hoping Karen was right, that the sound would just disappear. But it didn't. If anything, it seemed to be getting slightly louder, more insistent. The beautiful scenery became a blur. My focus narrowed to that single, unwelcome sound. Every tick was a little hammer blow against my peace of mind. Just as I was about to suggest we pull over, fate made the decision for us. We rounded a sharp bend and were met with a large, unmissable yellow sign, "Road closed." A couple of men in high-vis jackets stood beside a temporary barrier, looking apologetic. "Well," Karen said with a sigh. "That settles that." I pulled over to the side of the road, the ticking of the engine now seeming to mock us in the sudden quiet. I rolled down the window. "What's going on, fellas?" "Local cycling race, sir," one of the men said with a friendly, apologetic smile. "Roads shut for the next 3 hours at least. You'll have to turn back and take the old military road. It's about 5 miles back." 3 hours. The delay wasn't the issue. The issue was that ticking. I didn't want to drive Matilda another 5 miles, let alone the long, winding detour on an old military road, without knowing what was wrong. I killed the engine. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the bleating of a distant sheep. I looked at Karen. Her brow was furrowed with concern. "Okay," she said, her voice shifting into practical mode. "First things first. Let's not panic. Second, pop the bonnet. Let's see what we're dealing with." This was the Karen who had emerged on the road. The old Karen would have deferred to me, her anxiety spiraling. This Karen was a partner in problem solving. She grabbed our head torches from the glove box, even though it was broad daylight, knowing it was probably dark and greasy in the engine bay. I lifted the heavy bonnet and we both peered into the complex, oily heart of our home. It looked like an engine. A confusing labyrinth of pipes, wires, and belts. "Right," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Let's see." The ticking seemed to be coming from the top end. I started the engine again for a few seconds while Karen leaned in, listening intently. "It's definitely from this side," she confirmed, pointing towards the serpentine belt. Near the alternator, maybe. We spent the next half hour like that, a roadside diagnostic team. I poked and prodded, checking the tension on the belts, looking for anything obviously loose or broken. Karen was on her phone, typing symptoms into a search engine. Okay, forums say a rhythmic ticking could be a bad pulley bearing, a worn belt tensioner, or an exhaust manifold leak. The list of possibilities did little to reassure me. A pulley bearing was something we might be able to limp to a garage with. An exhaust leak was manageable. But some of the other suggestions were more catastrophic. The men managing the road closure occasionally glanced over, their expressions a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. One of them wandered over. "Everything all right there?" he asked. "Just a bit of engine trouble," I said, wiping a streak of grease from my forehead with the back of my hand. A new ticking noise just started up. He peered into the engine bay with the unearned confidence of a man who has seen many broken-down vehicles in his time. "Ah," he said sagely. "That'll be your alternator bearing, I reckon. Common on these transits. You hear that whine when you rev it?" I hadn't, but I started the engine and gave it a gentle rev. There it was. A high-pitched whine that rose and fell with the engine speed, previously masked by the general diesel clatter. The ticking was the prelude, the whine was the main event. "Aye, that's her," he nodded. "You don't want to be driving too far on that. If it seizes up, it'll shred your belt, and then you've got no water pump and no power steering. You'll be properly stuck." My heart sank. Stuck was not a word you wanted to hear in the middle of the Scottish Highlands. Karen, however, was already in solution mode. "Is there a garage nearby?" she asked the man, her tone calm and direct. "Our map isn't showing anything for miles." The man stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Well, the main dealer is back in Fort William, that's a good hour's drive. I wouldn't risk it. But there's Alistair. He's got a wee workshop about 4 miles up the old military road. It's not much more than a shed, but the man's a wizard with an engine. He's kept every old tractor and Land Rover in this glen running for the last 40 years. Alistair's workshop, Karen repeated, typing it into her phone. Unsurprisingly, it didn't appear on any map. "Can you tell us how to find it?" "Aye, easy enough. You go back the way you came, take the turn for the military road. Drive for about 3 miles. You'll pass a ruined croft on your left and a wee loching on your right. A quarter mile after that, you'll see a rusty sign for Fraser's Farm. His workshop is just behind the farmhouse. You can't miss it." I looked at Karen. A trip to Alistair's wee workshop felt like a huge gamble. But driving an hour back to Fort William felt like an even bigger one. It was one of those classic crossroads moments in travel. Do you stick with the known, risky path, or take a chance on the unknown, local knowledge path? What do you think? I asked her. She met my gaze, a determined glint in her eye. "I think we go and find Alistair the wizard," she said. "This is what it's all about, right? An unexpected detour." She was right. The old me, the one who planned his life in 6-month increments, would have hated this. The uncertainty, the reliance on a stranger's directions to find a mythical mechanic in a shed. But the new me, the Vanlife me, felt a flicker of something else, curiosity. This was an adventure, just not the one we had planned. "All right," I said, closing the bonnet with a decisive thud. "Let's go meet the wizard." We thanked the man profusely. He just smiled. "No worries. Tell Alistair that Callum sent you. He might even give you a discount. But probably not." We climbed back into Matilda, the mood inside transformed. The anxiety was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was now overlaid with a sense of purpose. We had a quest. Find Alistair. The old military road was exactly as you'd imagine. A single track of cracked tarmac, snaking its way through the vast, empty landscape. The scenery was even more raw and wild here than on the main road. Great, brooding mountains loomed over us, their peaks shrouded in cloud. It felt like we were driving into a different era. Ruined Croft on the left, Karen announced after a few minutes, ticking off a mental landmark. Check, I said. We Locken on the right. Check. We drove on in silence for another minute, our eyes scanning the horizon. And then we saw it. A rusty, swinging sign, half hidden by an overgrown hedge, that read, Fraser's Farm. It pointed down a muddy track that looked more suitable for a tractor than our 2-ton camper van. This must be it, I said, a hint of trepidation in my voice. In for a penny, in for a pound, Karen replied cheerfully. Let's go. I took a deep breath and turned Matilda down the track. The van lurched and swayed over the ruts, the suspension groaning in protest. The ticking from the engine seemed to get louder, as if it knew it was approaching its final judgment. We passed a sprawling, whitewashed farmhouse with smoke curling from its chimney, and just behind it, as promised, was a large, corrugated iron shed. The double doors were wide open, and from within came the clang of metal on metal and the muffled sound of a radio playing traditional Scottish folk music. We had found the wizard's lair. I pulled Matilda to a stop on the gravel patch in front of the shed and killed the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening. We looked at each other, a silent, here goes nothing, passing between us. We got out of the van and walked towards the open doors. The inside of the workshop was a chaotic cathedral of machinery. Tools hung from every conceivable surface, engine parts were piled in greasy towers, and the air was thick with the smell of oil, diesel, and hot metal. In the center of it all, a man was bent over the exposed engine of a very old Land Rover. He was tall and wiry, with a shock of untamable white hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and left out in the rain for 70 years. He wore blue overalls that were more grease than fabric. This had to be Alistair. He didn't seem to have noticed our arrival. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, not wanting to startle him. Finally, Karen cleared her throat. Excuse me. Are you Alistair? The man straightened up slowly, wiping his hands on an already filthy rag. He squinted at us, his bright blue eyes assessing us from under bushy white eyebrows. I am, he said. His voice was a low rumble, thick with an accent that made Callum seem mild by comparison. What can I do for you? Hi, I said, stepping forward. We were sent by Callum, from the road closure back there. Our van's making a bit of a noise. He thought you might be able to help. Alistair's expression didn't change. Callum's a fool, he stated, as if it were a simple fact of nature, like gravity. But he's not wrong about engines. What kind of noise? A ticking, I said. And a whine when you rev it. Callum thought it might be the alternator bearing. Did he now? Alistair grunted, tossing the rag onto a workbench. Bring it in. Let's have a listen. I felt a surge of relief. He hadn't turned us away. I backed Matilda into the space next to the Land Rover, the process feeling like a patient being admitted to an emergency room. Once the van was in position, Alistair motioned for me to pop the bonnet. He leaned in, his practiced ear listening to the engine's troubled idle. Give it a wee rev, he commanded. I gently pressed the accelerator. The whine rose obediently. He said after a moment, straightening up. Callum was right for once. Your bearing's shot, he pointed a gnarled, oil-stained finger at the alternator. That pulley's got a wobble in it. It's only a matter of time before it gives up completely. My heart did another little dip. Can you fix it? I asked, dreading the answer. Alistair looked from me to Karen, then back to the engine. I can fix anything, he said, not as a boast, but as a statement of quiet truth. The question is, do I have the part? He disappeared into a shadowy corner of the workshop, a place that seemed to function as his own personal automotive library. We could hear the sounds of him rummaging through heavy wooden boxes, muttering to himself. Karen and I exchanged a nervous glance. Our entire day, possibly our entire week, rested on what he might find in those boxes. He emerged a few minutes later, holding a small, greasy cardboard box. He blew a layer of dust off the top and peered at the label. A slow smile creased his weathered face. "Well now," he said. "It seems today is your lucky day. This is the last one I've got. Fits a transit from '06 to '14. What year is this beastie?" "It's a 2012, Karen said, her voice filled with relief. "Then it'll do," Alistair declared. "Right. The job'll take me an hour, maybe 2. You can wait in your van or you can have a cup of tea in the house. The wife's just put the kettle on." The sudden offer of hospitality was disarming. We hadn't expected it. "A cup of tea would be wonderful, thank you," Karen said warmly. Well, head on in. Just wipe your feet." As we walked towards the farmhouse, I looked back at Alistair. He had already opened his toolbox and was selecting a wrench with the focused precision of a surgeon. The radio played a mournful fiddle tune. We had stumbled into a world so completely removed from our old life, a world where problems were solved not with a credit card and a call to a national breakdown service, but with local knowledge, a shared cup of tea, and the quiet competence of a man in a shed. Alistair's wife, Isla, was as warm and welcoming as he was gruff and reserved. She sat us down at her large kitchen table, which looked out over the glen, and served us strong tea and thick slices of homemade fruitcake. She was full of questions about our journey, about where we'd come from and where we were going. "All the way from Sussex," she marveled. "In that thing? You're brave." "Some people call it brave, others call it crazy," I laughed. "Oh, I don't think it's crazy at all," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I think it's grand. To see the world while you're still fit enough to enjoy it. Alistair and we've never been further than Inverness. This glen is our world." We talked for the better part of an hour, about our children and her grandchildren, about the harshness of the winters and the beauty of the summers. There was no pretense, no small talk. It was just honest, human connection. The stress of the breakdown began to melt away, replaced by a sense of profound gratitude. This wasn't a disaster, it was a gift. We never would have met these people, or seen this hidden corner of the Highlands, if Matilda's alternator hadn't decided to give up the ghost. When we returned to the workshop, Alistair was just wiping his hands on his rag. The old, worn-out alternator sat on his workbench like a trophy. "All done," he announced. "She's good as new. Maybe even a wee bit better." He started the engine. It purred. The tick was gone. The whine was gone. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "Alistair, you are a magician," Karen said, her face beaming. "We can't thank you enough." "Just doing my job," he grunted, though I thought I saw a flicker of pride in his eyes. Then came the awkward part. "What do we owe you?" I asked, reaching for my wallet. He named a price that was so ridiculously reasonable it was almost laughable. It was less than half of what a Maine dealer would have charged us just for the diagnostic. I tried to give him more, but he waved it away. "That's the price," he said firmly. "I'm not a charity, but I'm not a thief either." As we were getting ready to leave, Karen had an idea. She disappeared into the van and came back with a bottle of a rather nice single malt whiskey we'd been saving for a special occasion. "This is for you," she said, handing it to him. "For being a wizard. And for the tea." Alistair looked at the bottle, then at us. For the first time, a genuine, broad smile broke across his face, transforming his craggy features. "Well now," he said, holding the bottle up to the light. "That's a proper thank you. You didn't have to do that." "We wanted to," I said. "And thank Isla for us too." "I will," he promised. "Now, where were you headed before all this?" "Loch Horn," Karen replied. He chuckled. "Ambitious. You'll not make it there before dark now. Tell you what. Instead of going back to the main road, keep going on this old track for another 2 miles. It peters out by the ruins of an old fishing village. There's a flat spot right by the water. Best view in the glen. Nobody will bother you there. It was another gift. A piece of local knowledge worth more than any guidebook recommendation. We said our goodbyes and pulled out of the muddy farm track, our hearts full. Matilda drove like a dream, her engine humming contentedly. We followed Alistair's directions and found the spot he'd described. It was breathtaking. A small, secluded bay, with the ruins of stone cottages tumbling down to the shore. The water was crystal clear, and across the sound, the mountains of Knoydart rose up, their peaks glowing orange in the late afternoon sun. We wouldn't have found this place in a million years on our own. It wasn't on any map, not listed on any camping app. It was ours for the night, thanks to a broken alternator and a series of chance encounters. As I leveled the van, Karen started getting out the camp chairs and the small table. "I'll make dinner," she said. "You just sit and enjoy the view. You've earned it." I sat in my chair, a mug of tea in my hands, and watched the sun begin its slow descent. The stress of the day had been completely replaced by a deep sense of peace and contentment. A breakdown that could have been a catastrophe had turned into one of the most memorable days of our trip. "You know," Karen said later, as we sat together eating a simple pasta dish and watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "This is exactly why we're doing this." "I was just thinking the same thing," I replied. Back home, a day like today would have been a total nightmare. It would have meant missed meetings for you, a massive garage bill, endless phone calls, just stress. My whole day would have been ruined, she agreed, nodding. I would have been so anxious about getting back to work, about the cost, about the inconvenience of it all. I would have been furious at the car, at the world. But today? I prompted. She looked out at the water, a soft, reflective smile on her face. Today was an adventure. A problem to be solved. We met Callum, and Alistair, and Isla. We saw a part of this country we never would have seen. We ended up in this incredible spot. The problem wasn't the point. The way we dealt with it was. I reached across and took her hand. Her fingers laced with mine, a familiar, comforting fit. This was the moment I wanted to bottle up and keep forever. The quiet of the evening, the warmth of her hand, the profound truth of what she'd just said. "I've been thinking a lot about that," I said, my voice a little softer. "About you. About how much you've changed since we started this." She looked at me, her expression curious. "Changed how?" "I remember when we were first talking about doing this," I began, letting the memories surface. "You were excited, but you were also terrified. You had a list. A long list of all the things that could go wrong. What if the van breaks down? What if we run out of money? What if we get sick? What if we hate it? What if we get on each other's nerves?" A faint blush colored her cheeks. "I remember. I was the voice of reason. You were the voice of fear," I corrected gently. "And I understood it. We were leaving everything that was safe and familiar. But watching you today, it was like watching a different person. The old Karen would have been beside herself with worry from the moment that ticking started. She would have been picturing the worst-case scenario, the tow truck, the astronomical bill. And today's Karen?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. Today's Karen just said, "Okay, pop the bonnet." She got out the head torches. She was the one Googling symptoms, asking the right questions. When Callum told us about Alistair, you didn't hesitate. You just saw the solution. You were calm, you were practical, you were in charge. Not just of the situation, but of your own response to it. I paused, trying to find the right words. That light I was talking about, the one that had dimmed back home? It's not just back, Karen. It's like a bloody searchlight now. You thrive on this. You thrive on the uncertainty, on having to be resourceful. I see you talking to strangers, navigating in foreign languages, fixing the water pump with a YouTube tutorial and a pair of pliers. Things that would have given you a panic attack 5 years ago are now just part of a Tuesday. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were happy tears. She squeezed my hand. It's because I feel capable, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For so many years, my life was defined by a routine someone else had created for me. A job I was good at, but didn't love. A life that was comfortable, but not fulfilling. I was living in a box, a very nice, safe box, but it was still a box. And I felt my world, my own sense of what I could do, shrinking. This, she gestured around her, at the van, at the mountains, at the vast, star-dusted sky, this broke the box. Out here, there's no script. Every day is different. Every problem is a puzzle. And it turns out, I'm good at puzzles. We're good at them. Together. She was right. Our relationship had changed too. We had always been close, but the shared reliance and constant collaboration of van life had forged a new kind of partnership. We were a team in a way we had never had to be before. We were co-pilots, mechanics, chefs, financial planners, and chief morale officers, all rolled into one. Leaving that life, she continued, wasn't about running away from something. It was about running towards something. Towards this. Towards the person I was always meant to be, I think. The one who isn't afraid of a strange noise in the engine because she knows that, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. The breakdown today wasn't the worst part of the day. It was the best part. It led us here. To this view. To this conversation. And that was it. That was the answer. Why was leaving home for van life the best decision for Karen? Because it had given her back her own power. It had replaced her anxiety with resilience, her fear with curiosity. It had shown her, and me, that she was stronger, more resourceful, and more joyful than the confines of her old life had ever allowed her to be. We sat in silence for a long time after that, watching the Milky Way emerge as a faint, shimmering band across the sky. The air grew cold, and we eventually retreated into the warmth of Matilda. As we got ready for bed, moving around each other in the small, familiar space, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Tomorrow, we didn't know where we would go. Maybe we'd try for Lockhorn again. Or maybe we'd explore more of this hidden glen. It didn't matter. The plan wasn't the point. The journey was. Lying in bed, listening to the gentle lapping of the water against the shore, I thought about our old life one last time. The big house, the 2 cars, the predictable rhythm of the weeks. It felt like a story about someone else. A life lived in black and white. Out here, with Karen sleeping peacefully beside me, with the memory of a gruff mechanic and a warm cup of tea and a sky full of stars, life was inglorious, unpredictable, full color. This, I thought to myself as I drifted off to sleep, this is what it means to be truly home. It's not a place, it's a feeling. It's the freedom to chase the horizon, the resilience to face the bumps in the road, and the joy of sharing it all with the person you love. And for that, I would fix 1,000 alternators.